Look at this t-shirt, Black Sabbath. They look young in this picture. But guess what? When I flip the t-shirt over carefully, without knocking anything off the wall, you're going to see that it's actually a 1999 reunion tour of Black Sabbath. And now we can transition the camera onto me, Jennifer McCreath. Whoa, a lot of light in here today. Wow, so Ozzy Osbourne, we just saw him on stage about a month ago, belting it out in front of 80,000 people in Birmingham. Take a deep breath. This is going to be a difficult video. I'm shaking. So we get word that 17 days later, Ozzy has passed away at the age of 76. Considering all the drugs the guy did in his life, 76 is actually a pretty good deal, I'd say. I gotta find something to balance this camera, because I'm literally shaking right now. I'm gonna see if I can put a box here. That's too low. Maybe 3 boxes. Hockey cards that nobody wants to buy. At least these boxes are good for something. I can use them to prop up my camera. There we go. The Sabbath shirt in the background. So I bought this shirt. I'm going to turn it back over this way. Whew. This light, if I turn this light off, too dark. We're not really prepared. We're just turning the camera on and talking. Anyway, so yeah, music, Black Sabbath. We all know, if you've seen some of my other videos, that I grew up in the 80s. And I basically ignored pop culture. I wasn't a big music fan growing up. I was aware of some of the biggest stars. Every time you turn the TV on, it's Michael Jackson. Who else was the big? Boy George and Culture Club had a #1 hit. Duran Duran had some hits. It wasn't till the early 90s, more actually the mid-90s. I'd been dragged to a few concerts throughout my younger years, but I didn't really understand or appreciate what I was seeing. I didn't know the music. Finally, of course, I got a job at a hardware store, and there was a radio on, and they played, I guess we'd say, a mixture of top hits and classic rock. So of course I discovered at that time the Eagles' Hell Freezes Over record had just come out, and there were some singles that was getting a lot of airplay. So you can thank the hardware store for introducing me to 70s music, which I quickly realized was a lot better than the 80s music that I was brought up on, perhaps. Looking back, the 80s are just as important as the 70s, but so yeah, I got into music. I listened to the Eagles. All of a sudden, people started introducing me to other 70s bands. Like Aerosmith was one of the other first ones I was introduced to. And of course, my brother grew up loving Kiss. So I went to a couple of Kiss concerts before I even knew any other songs. And I'm like, and this was right when they did the reunion. I'm like, wow, this is pretty interesting stuff. So I became a Kiss fan, and eventually took myself to Kiss concerts with other people. Yeah, I owe my brother a lot, because he introduced me to a lot of great music. And I got this phone call. It was probably late 98. And my brother had gone away to school. And he announced he was coming home to Toronto, where we spent most of our time growing up, even though we are Nova Scotians. Black Sabbath is doing a reunion tour. I'm like, Black Sabbath? Who are they? Do I know them? And he's like, Ozzy Osbourne's original band. I'm like, ah! See, I'm old. My brother's not quite as old. But we didn't experience the 70s, because we were born in the 70s. So we were too young to understand and appreciate everything that happened in the 70s live as it happened. So again, my brother had the Ozzy Osbourne 1993 double live album. So I grew up in the house, at least in the mid-90s. I was familiar with Ozzy Osbourne and some of these songs from that record. But I didn't know the difference between Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath until I got that phone call. Hard to believe. So my brother's like, yeah, they're playing at the Sky Dome, but it's going to be like the Sky Tent, so every seat's still going to be pretty good, even if we're up in the upper deck. So I'm like, yeah, count me in. So I had like 6 weeks to prepare. I got to dig out. And this is 1998, 99. There's no YouTube. There's no readily available music. So I went to the CD stores and found as many Black Sabbath CDs, maybe even cassettes back then. It was right around that time. I didn't even have a CD player. So I became familiar very quickly with Black Sabbath. And I'm like, wow, this is very raw, unique. A lot of the heavy metal that I had known at that time was more polished, and this was just pure raw sound. So anyways, off we went. 1999, I believe it was February 9th at the Sky Dome. There was a couple opening acts. I think Pantera was one of them. I can't even remember the other one. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, Black Sabbath came out, and everyone's like, God, they're so old. They were 50 years old. Guess how old I am right now? Older than that. But wow, what a show. Even up in the boonies. The nosebleed seats. Usually the Sky Dome has terrible acoustics. But when they section off the tent and put up this big rubber tarp, I don't know if anyone remembers what I'm talking about. The full Sky Dome is a baseball stadium. But then they bring this big tarp down about second base. So it's not even half the venue. It's probably 40% of the venue. Sectioned off. So you got this band standing out on the pitcher's mound and everybody behind home plate or on the floor. So the acoustics were really good. I'd previously been to a few shows in the tent. At least, I'm trying to remember. Phil Collins, 1997, in the Round. It's also in the Sky Tent. Excellent show. So there it was. I got to see Black Sabbath. And that was really cool. So, of course, 2 years later, we have this thing called Ozfest finally coming to Toronto. But it's not in a stadium. It's down in this big open parking lot down by the lakeshore. So by then, I was pretty good Black Sabbath fan. But I'm like, God, they've got 6 or 7 opening acts that I've never heard of. All these new bands. One, of course, who I did know and had seen live was Marilyn Manson. So I called up my buddy and said, they got this Ozfest and the tickets are standing room general admission. It's all going to be little kids, teenagers. Let's go. We're big 240-pound muscular people. We can maybe, hang out at the back, and then when the good stuff comes on, we'll push our way to the front. So that's pretty much what happened. I did go early enough. I saw all these opening acts. Crazy Town, Slipknot, Disturbed. What an interesting opening. Buddy comes out with a, what do you call these things here? Staple gun. I want to make sure you people are disturbed. So he sticks his tongue out. And he goes, boop. Are you people disturbed yet? So I'm like, okay, that's rather interesting. I can see why Ozzy Osbourne might want these guys as an opening act. So yeah, all these opening acts play. I don't know any of their songs. And then, of course, Marilyn Manson comes out. And this is 2001, so he'd had his kind of mega hit in 96 and a really good follow-up in 98. And now he was just starting to trend down, 2001. But he was still a pretty big deal. So seeing him live for what, for me, would have been, what, the third time? That was pretty cool. Then to our amazement, half of the crowd bolts out. They either leave or they go to the back. Again, these are mostly teenagers in the audience, say 16 to 20-year-olds. By then I was what? Older. Not much older, but let's just say our pathway to the front row was a lot easier than we thought. So there we were, standing in the very front row in this mosh pit. And out walks Geezer Butler, right in front of us. I'm like, oh my God. And of course, Sabbath comes out, plays about an hour and 5 minutes set, a little shorter than the reunion set. But when you have 8 or 9 opening acts, you can get away with shorter sets. So, Ozzy played the wizard, and then he actually threw the harmonica into the crowd. Literally 4 or 5 people's reach away. I'm like, God damn it, throw the thing over here. So I came within 10, 15 feet of getting a harmonica. It's one thing to be in a concert and to be up in the cheap seats, but it's another thing to be right up front. And oh my goodness, that set absolutely mesmerized me, blew me away. Something I'll absolutely never forget. And here we are years later, I come to appreciate just how important heavy metal didn't really exist until a couple of British bands in the late 60s started experimenting with the heavy metal style. And Black Sabbath pretty much said, fuck with the experimentation, we're just going to go hard, heavy, all the time, every song. So you got Zeppelin, you got Deep Purple, and you got Black Sabbath all sort of popping up at the same time. And then you can argue which one's better, but I think there's no denying that Sabbath was the first true heavy metal band. And of course, they would open the floodgates, shall we say. All of a sudden, these other rock bands, classic rock, hard rock, started incorporating some metal. Then we saw a wave of new early 70s metal bands in England. I feel ashamed because Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, I don't really know a lot of their material. But that's just an example of what happened. One of the earlier heavy metal bands I was exposed to was the Scorpions, who started out in 1965 as a psychedelic band in Germany. And in the mid to late 70s, they changed record companies, and then they went from psychedelic to metal, and boom, off their career went. Of course, I would be introduced to the likes of Motorhead and Metallica, as I mentioned before, Kiss. So heavy metal is among my favorite genres of music, right up there with the country rock that initially inspired. I'm not expired yet. Hopefully not for a long time. But never did get to see Ozzy solo. There's definitely a lot of hits there and a lot of great tours. But to me, the Sabbath stuff is the best. The earlier the better. That first Sabbath album, classic. The Paranoid album. Oh my goodness, Master of Reality. All the way through, there's some good stuff. I basically, when Ozzy left Sabbath, I think 78 or 79, Never Say Die, I know the band carried on, but I don't really consider those 80s albums Black Sabbath, even though there's a lot of talented musicians that came in and out of that band. The irony, Deep Purple's lead singer actually spent a year in Black Sabbath, Ian Gillan. Yeah, to me, Sabbath, when you say Black Sabbath, you think of the 69 to 78 time frame. And of course, 99, they did a reunion tour. They put out a live album and a couple of new songs. And sporadically would go from Ozzy solo. This Ozfest thing, as you may know, was an annual event for years. It was usually Ozzy headlining as a solo act, but every now and then he'd dig out Black Sabbath. So I'm so happy and lucky that the Ozfest I got to attend was Black Sabbath. Should be mentioned that Zakk Wylde's solo band was one of those opening acts, and he actually played No More Tears, so that's pretty cool. Of course, the younger audience remembers Ozzy from this reality TV show, which I thought was rather sad and stupid. I mean, basically made the guy look like a fucking idiot. I don't know if that's the way he is, or is just his brain had been fried. But yeah, I can't say I watched much of that. But yeah, I'm still in a state of shock. The news broke yesterday that he had passed. And I had watched that Birmingham show 18 days ago. I know they wheeled Ozzy on stage because he's got Parkinson, he can't stand. So they wheel him out, and he's in this big-ass black chair. It's really cool. He does a 4-song solo set with his solo band. And then Black Sabbath comes out and he does 4 more songs. So the guy's out there, 8 songs, close to an hour maybe, 45 minutes. And he's just belting it out. He's always had that kind of bizarre, twangy voice. And I can't say, out of all the rock and metal voices, he's definitely unique, but I wouldn't say Ozzy's voice has ever really been one of my favorite. But the guy just is full of energy, especially in between songs. He's like, "Louder, you motherfuckers! I can't hear you! Scream at the top of your lungs!" I never would have thought that the Ozzy Osbourne I saw on television 17 days ago would be dead. I didn't realize how sick the guy was. And everyone's talking about how he did "Mama, I'm Coming Home." But he had a line, he's like, "It's so great to be back on this fucking stage." I'm like, yeah. All these bands say they're retiring and all these reunion tours and blah, 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 blah. This won't be the last show. Well, I guess it is. Thank you for the memories, Ozzy Osbourne, and all 4 originals of Black Sabbath, and everyone else who came along to keep the band alive. Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan. A lot of precious. It's funny, I was watching the 40th anniversary of Live Aid last night. It's funny, back then, these 40-year-olds were in their primes. The 80s bands were the stars, and the 70s bands were considered over the hill, but it's like these guys are so powerful and fresh with their songs. Here I am looking at these classics, and back then they were new songs. I don't think we'll ever see a period where music is like this ever again. Here we are, 500 years after the fact, listening to people like Beethoven and Bach and Tchaikovsky, studying them in school. I truly believe 100 years from now, kids will be learning about 60s and 70s rock. Today's music, 2025, I'm not so sure. But as long as I'm here and alive, we're going to be playing 60s and 70s music every day. Either on a computer or in a headset somewhere. We've lost out on the art of great sound systems. It's all iPods and phones and speakers and shit. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that some of these old timers are still at it and they can still perform. A lot of old timers can't perform, but they still get up on stage and embarrass themselves. Ozzy, you did a great job in your last show, and I will cherish being able to download that and watch it many, many times. Anyways, there's my 2 cents from a trans woman, Canadian fan of heavy metal. Thanks for watching, everyone.